Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Today I'm chatting with Ian Brown, who is the founder, director and chairman at Chestnut Bio. Chestnut have a technology that could revolutionise the plastics industry. It's going to have a massive impact, so I'm really looking forward to talking to Ian about that journey and also about his journey as a serial entrepreneur. Hi Ian, thanks for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
We're going to jump straight in because
Yes.
I think you have got a fabulous technology and I want as many people to know about this technology as possible. So
Excellent.
can you tell me about Chestnut Bio and the technology it's developed?
Yes. So 2019 we set up the company on the back of a smart grant from Innovate UK. I had a clever idea that we should be using biodegradable plastic for a whole load of uses, but especially tree guards, so that we could get rid of oil-based plastic in forestry. So we got a patent, and that patent is to turn sugar into a material that can displace oil-based plastic. And I think that's the quickest way I can explain what we do.
Wow. So what makes sugar a good replacement?
Well, if you think 10% of all the oil in the world is actually moved into producing plastic, and plastic is brilliant, and the reason it is absolutely everywhere. Without plastic, we couldn't do what we do as a modern society. And if you think about it, oil is made from plants. Sugar is a plant. So what we're doing is simply taking a different type of sugar in order to make the polymer, which is just strings of chemicals that make the plastic, the very huge range of plastics that we use today. So sugar is far better because it isn't persistent. So if you look at our company tagline, made robustly, not to last, that's the difference. So a lot of oil-based plastic will break down, but into tiny bits, little micro particles of plastic, which never ever break down. Whereas our material will break down to CO2 and water, and that's it.
Okay. So is it just tree guards or are you looking broader than that?
No, Tree Guards was our first attempt at a product. So very quickly we realized when we registered the patent, which was a really important part of our journey, make sure nobody else could take our idea, that our material was actually capable of replacing a whole load of other products. So we've got 5 in the pipeline. So cable-tied Tree Guards is where we started, but we have just literally launched the Candy coat hanger. So we're working with Hangers of London to make a biodegradable, non-toxic coat hanger for the fashion industry. We're working on a 3D printing reel so that people can print at home objects that will then biodegrade. And we're also producing electrical packaging. So a really wide range, and there's a lot more than the 5 initial ideas, but we've got 5 companies sponsoring us. So for instance, Four Seasons Hotel Group are helping via ocean charities to come up with a cable tie that we would use in a marine environment in the Maldives to restore coral reefs. So that's a really lovely project.
Yeah, that's a proper circular economy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it you that comes up with all of these ideas?
No, there's now a team of us. So it certainly started off as just me at the very beginning. We registered the patent in the company name, and now there's a real team that comes together. So we've got a new CEO, so that's very exciting. We've got a commercial director, we've got a finance manager, we've got somebody managing the laboratory that we've just built in Darlington, as well as a couple of scientists who are shareholders. So we've got a really nice, balanced and really diverse team of individuals.
Okay. What are your aspirations for the business? Because you can think about it, there's so many things that plastics are prevalent in.
Yeah.
The world is your oyster. Where do you want to take it?
Yes. No, absolutely. Whereas I said a few years ago we were a manufacturing company, we very quickly realized that the best way to grow the business really quickly is actually to be a formulations and licensing business.
Yeah.
So we'll have a small team and a laboratory and equipment and staff that will test different formulas for third-party companies. So there are millions of companies out there who realize oil-based plastic is doing them no good and doing the planet no good. So plastics, to go big picture, plastics is a $508 billion a year business that also does $500+ billion of damage to the environment. And plastic's cheap, but only if you don't count that kind of secondary cost. We're not going to replace all of that, and certainly not overnight, but we've identified some key businesses who do want to make that change. Our product is a little bit more expensive initially, but only if you don't count the secondary cost, really. So we're working with those companies first, and there's a bioplastic that doesn't compost naturally. You need high temperatures, so PLA. So you'll see a lot of coffee lids with PLA written on.
Yeah.
That's already taken something like a $3.7 billion, foothold in the business. So there's already companies out there who are claiming to be biodegradable but aren't quite as good as us that have a foothold. So I think that it's a good omen for us because you can see that there's real opportunities out there. So we'll start off with these key 5 products and then extend it from there. But we've done an SEIS, so we've done a seed enterprise investment scheme raise just before Christmas. And I'd be being too modest if I didn't mention that we're about to do an EIS raise during the next few months just to extend the runway. The commercial contracts now beginning to come in, so the business is at a really good place in terms of being able to expand really quickly.
And it looks like collaboration is going to be a key part of how you move forwards. Like you say, finding those partners who are already in those industries that desperately need to change to make an impact. Yes. How are you going about building those relationships?
Got a brilliant commercial director, Alden Dunnipace. So between himself and myself and the rest of the team, we've got some really good contacts. Taken on Mike as our CEO, who's had 32 years at Dow Chemicals, working in the Netherlands. So he's got a brilliant set of experiences and contacts. And I think anybody investing in us is going to look for that sort of track record and real depth of knowledge in terms of the big plastic world, which is going to have to move in our direction. So biorefineries, all of the supply chain that's been built for oil will begin to be built for plant-based material as the big transition happens. Yeah.
And your strapline, what was your strapline again?
Made robustly, not to last.
Which is brilliant. Where did that come from?
I can't remember what percentage ownership I have in that. It is trademarked, so nobody else is having it. And it just, when you say something, and it just makes sense. Because we want, so the tree guard's a good example. We've taken material that would last 2 years. We've added to it so that outside in the worst Scottish weather, or choose anywhere else with horrendous weather, Manchester, wherever, it will last 7 years, which is just long enough for a tree guard. So in places of real isolation, it's great to have a tree guard that will do its job and then just disappear into a benign end product. So there's a lot of situations. Obviously, without the weather, our material will last a lot longer. So we will ask people how long their plastic needs to last, and then we'll produce something that's completely biodegradable that will last just the right amount of time with a little of margin of error. This
isn't the first business that you've been involved with or started up.
Indeed.
You'll
think of the tuck shop at school.
I'm thinking that you're a serial entrepreneur. That's what I'm thinking.
Yes. In fact, when I was a farmer, I was both a serial entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur.
Oh, so, well, there we go.
Yes.
So farming. Was that the start? Farming.
Yeah. Third generation tenant farmer. Humble tenant to the Duke of Northumberland. I shall tug my forelock affectionately. One of 275 tenant farms on 100,000 acres that the Duke and his estate own. I was third generation. My grandfather had been there since 1950. It was a very, very rough farm. It was actually confiscated by the War Ag Department because it was so badly farmed during the Second World War and afterwards. So when my grandfather took it on, it was difficult. Sadly, he accrued an overdraft that he left to my father, my uncle, and my auntie. A bit of a family tradition. So when my father died very suddenly, when I was 21 and he was 54, he left me a very large overdraft. No will, limited insurance, If only he had had better legal advice
If only.
and financial advice. So when my father said all of this will be yours one day, sadly he meant the other stuff. So I kind of got dropped in at the deep end, but some would argue that's where you learn to swim. So yes, but to answer your question directly, probably 14 different businesses that I've been involved in setting up over the intervening 37 years. None of them have gone bust. So the good news is all of them were learning experiences where nobody got hurt. I did some learning. I've got a bad habit of often being 30 years ahead of where the market is. So I did my first carbon footprint on my farming business 30 years ago. We had one of the first recognised mineral water sources in Britain in 1991. We had broadband on our farm before ANIC had broadband. We had the first district heating system in Britain that was heating both domestic and business properties. And we had a clean room on the farm making synchrotron mirrors, as well as a bakery, as well as the NHS North locality. So yeah, we've been very lucky that we've had the opportunity to try out a lot of things, perhaps ahead of time. And that teaches you something, because it teaches you that you might be right about your business idea, but the timing might be wrong. But I think with replacing damaging oil-based plastic with plant-based, I hope everybody recognises that the time is right, business-wise, and morally we're a little bit late.
You talked there about always being ahead of the game and always looking forwards, and maybe sometimes looking too far ahead. Or
Indeed.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think you are always looking ahead?
Yeah.
What is it about you that makes you a visionary rather than a here and now?
Curiosity. Although I'm reasonably high IQ, I think it's as much about absorbing information and joining dots. And in business, there's an element of so what? Because lots of people have, particularly inventors, lots of people have the good idea, but then it never happens. University spin-outs is a really interesting area. And our business is a lovely amalgam of commercial people who've absolutely been there, got the T-shirt, got some scars, but also some academic people and some, high-level commercial big company people. And entrepreneurs can be very bad at putting diversity into their business. And I think being sent away to school, I got a scholarship to go to Harrogate, which when you live in Northumberland seemed a long way away. So I think the boarding school experience, there's pros and cons to that, but certainly I think it gave me far more diversity of outlook. I was meeting people from some very diverse cultural, economic, every background you can think of, from people from all over the world. And I think I wouldn't have got that if I'd stayed in rural Northumberland.
That's a really interesting perspective, because I think a lot of people, and probably me included, my perception would be if you go to boarding school, everybody's the same.
Yeah.
Everybody's got money. Everybody's white. Everybody's that would have been my perception, but clearly that wasn't your experience.
No, it really wasn't. I'm a people person, so our finance manager sometimes says Ian collects people, in terms of I collect knowledge, I build relationships. And in business, that can be really, networking should always be about giving, not taking. But I think although there's a limit to how much time you should spend, networking for networking's sake, I think that to succeed, particularly in a scale-up business like ours, it is crucial that people hear your story, understand it, and if they can be part of it, for mutual benefit, that's great. And I think deep down, it's because everything that I've ever done has been about the environment. So I've planted 60 acres of trees, just finished 10 years as a chairman of the Forestry Commission in the North East, which is kind of a government role, 2 days a month, because I just think things like tree planting are really important. So I wanted to give time and energy to that. I've just finished a Churchill Fellowship, traveling all around the world looking at agroforestry. So I've always balanced, and going back to your question about how do you get the foresight? How do you future-proof your business? I think a lot of that is just taking every opportunity, which includes voluntary, a lot of voluntary work, which some people would see as a distraction from your business.
No, I agree. I mean, I've always found that the voluntary things I've done have helped me in business because you have a different perspective. It's that diversity of thought thing again, isn't it? Helping you to think in a different way. Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now. Obviously, you have a huge number of roles. When you've started up businesses, what have you learned about what makes a good startup to a business?
Yeah, startup business is fascinating, and the founders aren't always the people. I mean, without a shadow of doubt, this is the first business that I've had, that I've started with others, where it is limitless in terms it could be a unicorn business. The plastics industry is so vast. The amount we would wish to have is relatively modest. So it has limitless opportunity. And I think that's, in terms of the people that you need to do that, I think that does become quite diverse. And I think we've been pretty good this time round at bringing in a range of people and thinking of clever ways to get those people to join when the company can't afford to pay them the absolute wage they deserve to be on straight away. So obviously the whole point of using equity early on and having staff share incentive schemes and all of that is to bring your talent in early. And I think the hook is partly the ask and the mission. I think, I know when Alden joined the business, I think he said to his kids, "What should Dad do?" And I think the kids said, "Well, you should save the world, Dad." And plastic is one of those. Well, it's a contribution, because you just look at all of the damage being caused, just coral reefs alone, mangrove swamps. If we can move those two issues alone along swiftly by creating no nanoparticles of plastic in the oceans, that alone would be a job well done. So yeah,
I think you're right. You often hear investors talking, and yes, they want a great idea and they want a great business that's got longevity and all of that, but actually what they're investing in is the team. It's the people that can make the difference as to whether that idea is successful or not.
Yes.
So as an entrepreneur, are you going to get itchy feet? Are you going to think in 2 years' time, well, I've done this plastics thing now, I need something else to do?
Yeah, this is very clearly an SEIS, EIS type business with a very much a 5-year, when we hit this turnover and this amount of profit, we would expect to be selling out. So, we are the big company that started small. We'd love to be the next Ineos, who knows? But at this stage, there is nothing holding me back from, the big dreams that we all have. At that stage, it's almost built in to the project that in 5 years' time, the founding shareholders, could cash out. And I'd love to be a business angel. I've just this week alone had a couple of projects, people who just need that little bit of help, just need that little bit of money. It's a sector I know about. If I was sitting there with cash in the bank, I'd be going, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's put some money in. Let's invest in equity. Yeah.
And would that be around environmental sustainability businesses, or?
I think so. You're always best to invest in areas that you really know about. And, my whole life being a farmer, there's some lovely phraseology about farming. One is you should farm as if you're going to live forever and live as if you're going to die tomorrow. I think that's not a bad philosophy. So yeah, I do think long term, and every time I drive past, we gave up the farm in 2012 because it kind of wasn't good for our financial health. Mum still lives on the farm, but every time I see the 60 acres of trees and the hedges and all the work I did, there's kind of legacy there. And I think very few people, I've been very blessed, not just with my children and my businesses, but blessed in many ways at the opportunities, that I've had. So I've got plenty I can reflect on. But yes, it's not job done yet.
And as you touched on earlier, you have a number of other sort of voluntary roles that you work alongside that. You talked about the Forestry Commission, but you've got some other roles as well, haven't you?
I have. So I'm currently chairman of the Ousburn City Farm. That's a 6-year appointment, so I've got another couple of years to do. And the City Farm, we've had COVID, we've had avian flu, been through the mill, but the farm's doing really, really well. We've come out of it exceptionally well, and it's a lovely charity. It turns out my family used to graze cattle and sheep under Byker Bridge in the 1890s.
Wow, how did you find that out?
My auntie, who's 90, she'll be 94 this year, said, "Ooh, you're at Ousburn." Yes, we definitely, the family, when they were based at Morpeth, used to graze cattle and sheep there. And I thought, isn't life wonderful with its kind of circular motion on occasions? So the City Farm, I chair CPRE in Northumberland, so that's a Council for Protection of Rural England. So with my kind of planning and local authority and One North East background, it's kind of making sure that the right decisions are made in terms of the countryside. I chair a regional land use group, and I'm a governor on the main board of incorporation, or the board of corporation at EPNE, so Educational Partnership North East. So I've just been reappointed for another 3 years there, and I'm the lead governor on the UN Sustainability Goals. So we're one of the few FE colleges in Britain to put the UN Sustainability Goals at the very centre of everything that we do. So.
And obviously you're very passionate about the rural community, and we're very fortunate in the North East that we have such a large amount of land that is rural, and it's very accessible for people that live in towns and cities. But it brings with it problems, connectivity. You're talking about buses turning up at the farm, with devolution about to happen. Do you think that is going to be a good thing for our rural economies in the North East?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. There's a big job to do. I'm ex-board member of One North East, so we've all been here before in terms of let's have an organisation with money to spend covering the wider North East. Obviously Tees Valley is separate, and it's interesting that we've chosen to take our business from an NE1 postcode to a DL1 postcode via TS1, and the main reason for that is we feel that the plastic supply chain is kind of starts with biorefineries. So we do think Teesside, with Grangemouth closing as an oil refinery, which is quite an interesting decision in Scotland, I think that Tees Valley has a great opportunity for having the big infrastructure to produce the raw material for businesses like ours. So, that's one of the main reasons. But I think it is important. I think getting rid of One North East and having LEPs, I don't think has done the North East, if I can be radical and say that, didn't do anybody any favours, and everybody tried their best, and we're now in a new chapter. So let's hope that, and we get some cohesion, because I think that was what, no matter what you think of One North East, that was one of the things that was good, that it brought unity across the whole of the region. Yeah, and we had a regional assembly. The irony was, I remember saying to my wife, she said, it's ridiculous, they're going to have a vote about having a regional assembly. And I had to say, actually, there already is one and I'm on it. A little embarrassing. So she had no idea. But I was on 92 committees at the time. So
92?
92, I know.
How can you do that job properly? If you're on 92 committees?
When you're a county councillor, you automatically get a whole load of other automatic positions. So, for instance, my rural area covered 8 parishes who all had a parish council, who all meet monthly, and so on and so on.
So did you just spend your whole time at meetings of various committees?
Yes.
Yeah.
As my middle daughter said, Dad, the only time I ever saw you on a tractor was on the telly, which I thought was quite an accurate but slightly damning.
Was that just for PR purposes?
Perish the thought. But I came up through Young Farmers, Farmers Union, then elected politics briefly before I decided I didn't like party politics. My skin is a little thin for party politics. And and one thing leads to another. So I would always say, even the bad bits, and there's, all of our life, we can edit our lives to be good or bad. It's always an unbalanced thing when you look backwards. But everything is a stepping stone. So I think the secret to my happiness is remembering the compliments and forgetting the criticism, but also being gently delusional, but delusional with purpose. But surrounding myself with incredibly realistic people. So I have the counterbalance, might not exist in me, otherwise I would have given up years ago. But the counterbalance is in really good people around me who can add that reference. Yeah.
So outside of all of these voluntary positions and committees and your day job with Chestnut, what makes you tick? What do you do to chill out and forget about all of these things?
I do the very opposite of what most people would find relaxing. So I chair the Newcastle Speakers Club, so public speaking. So I encourage people. For most people, public speaking is higher up than even death itself in terms of fears.
Yes.
So I do find that, and I had a speech impediment as a child, so my whole life is about counterbalancing. So I was an only child living in the middle of nowhere, so I didn't really have anybody to copy for most of my time as a very small child, so I think that was part of it. But I did have a stutter, I did mispronounce some words, so I had to go through a fair bit of speech therapy. Yeah, and I had a patch as well, so I really was as a child. So yes, in terms of, I used to on my CV put travel and photography because that's all I had time for. And then I think I did a 10-week course on medieval sword fighting because I thought, well, that at least balances it a little bit.
Was that so actually doing medieval sword fighting?
Yes, no, not reading about it. Yes, they start you off with broom handles and you progress to a plastic sword. As sold in all good National Trust shops, and then from there, yes, I didn't progress to the metal ones that could do, but it was fascinating actually because it was part dance, part fitness. So yeah, there was a lot of skills. It's mainly about defense. It's mainly about not getting stabbed yourself.
Okay,
with a big...
not carrying a sword in defence wherever you
go. I still have my practice sword in the house, but yes.
Okay.
But
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, you've been involved in so many different things. A lot of them, I would imagine, medieval sword fighting isn't within anybody's comfort zone. And this podcast is about being fearless. Where do you get your inner strength from, and how do you overcome any fears that you do have when you start something new?
Yeah, fear's an interesting thing, isn't it? And I think doing a Churchill Fellowship, the people who do Churchill Fellowships, it's quite one of the first things they ask you to do if you're successful. There's a couple of thousand people apply every year for
I don't know anything about it. What was it?
When Winston Churchill died in 1965, coincidentally exactly the same year I was born, they had a public raise of money in his honour, and they raised a few million quid, and the family said, when asked the question, how would you like this money to be spent? They said, we think Winston Churchill would like the idea of sending people to foreign countries to learn about a topic and then come back to Britain and spread that knowledge in Britain. So every year they've sent more than 100 people since 1965. And I won a fellowship to travel all around. You can choose basically anywhere in the world. So I would encourage anybody watching to look up, it's now called the Churchill Fellowship. You basically can travel anywhere in the world. They recommend 2 continents. A lot of people go to Japan, America, wherever. Pick a topic that you are passionate about. You don't have to be academically qualified, just have a real passion for the topic, and then submit the application. You'll be interviewed. I was interviewed by Churchill's grandson, which was quite the killer question. So what would it mean to travel with the Churchill name? So fascinating interview, lucky enough to get it, travelled all around Europe. I went interrailing. As my kid said, Dad, will you stop doing things we're supposed to be doing?
My daughter, my 19-year-old is interrailing at the moment.
Wow. But I managed, in May 2019, there was a special offer, upgraded to first class, 30 trains, 23 days, 25 kilos of luggage, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, a week in Brussels, then Tanzania, Kenya, Zanzibar, and South Africa. So
Wow.
I did the reverse swallows, 7.5 weeks. And that I found really life affirming. So 2019, I think I spent 3 months of that year abroad. Didn't have a single hotel booking for the next 7.5 weeks, and just kind of freelanced my way around Europe and Africa, following this idea of agroforestry. Let's find out as much about it as possible. Do something by yourself, understand yourself, see a world of opportunity, and then work out which other bits you can do. But don't be unambitious about that, because I think, as my project now has proved, anything is possible if you get the right team. Yeah.
And in the future, let's presume that, as I'm sure it will be, Chestnut Bio is successful, you get your exit plan, you're invested in a few businesses. What would you like to do more of that you're not able to do at the moment?
Travel. I have a partner who lives in Kenya, so it would be good to be together. It's a long commute here to Nairobi.
Yes.
And I want to be, and it's something that struck me at boarding school, is how international some people were. So I had friends who were 11 who parents worked in Doha, used to travel the world, and they had full passports as a teenager. Like, they were literally getting the big passports and they were covered in stamps. And I was going, oh wow. So I think I want to be, a citizen of the world. I think to be internationalist. If I am putting on air miles, it'll be for a purpose. So, and I think encouraging others to be more global in a world that kind of sometimes is shrinking and is being a bit afraid of, we're in probably the most uncertain time that certainly people of my age have seen. We've lived in relatively peaceful times, and for business that is going to be challenging. But we've already got links in America and Taiwan with Chestnut, and this will be a global business. It is a global business, and the quicker we can build that, the better.
Well, I'm absolutely convinced that you will make a success of it. It's a fantastic product. You've got a great team, and I wish you all the best for the future. And thank you for coming and telling me and the audience about what you're up to, as well as many other random things along the way.
Absolutely. Been a complete pleasure. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.